Hey everyone, Ben Williamson from InvestorHub, here with our second instalment on the ASX. So now we're talking about how do companies join or leave the ASX. So let's talk about joining first. There's really two ways to join the ASX. One is to list on it, to apply to be quoted on the ASX. You would do what's called an IPO, or an initial public offering. The IPO is when you offer your shares to investors to raise an amount of money, and you have to meet what's called the spread requirements, which is about $5 million in cash or net assets, I think. And importantly, the spread is 300 investors. And they really want 300 like arm's length investors. You can't have myself and my wife, my self-managed super fund. That's sort of considered one person. So it really wants 300 arm's length people to all invest a minimum of $2,000 or more in order to get the spread, and you want to be raising $5 million or more in order to be listed. So for a lot of small companies, that one of those can be difficult. Usually the spread is kind of the more difficult one. Obviously for larger companies, they're able to get over those hurdles of 5 mil and 300 people. The process of listing is usually quite drawn out. You're talking about 6 months or more between the compliance side of it, the capital raise, the education piece. You've really got to sort of educate people on what you're doing in the journey. Usually you're appointing a lead manager. You've got legal representation. You're doing specific board meetings. You're putting together a prospectus. It's quite a detailed process to do. There's obviously a lot of benefits to being listed, and a lot of investors who would much more readily invest in a small listed company that gives them liquidity than a small unlisted company that might still have the same upside benefits, but without that access to liquidity, you're kind of like all in to it. Whereas if instances change, etc., in a listed company, you can get out. So you've got sort of it's a lower risk option in general. The other way for a business to be listed is essentially to be bought by another listed company, and then for either that to be a division of that listed company, or for the listed company to actually switch and become focused on that as its main thing. So this is commonly referred to as a reverse listing or a backdoor listing. These used to be a lot more prevalent. You used to be able to do it a lot more. A lot of those rules have tightened up, which is questionable. I think people have very differing views on whether they should be allowed more frequently or not. Some really great examples of backdoor listings are, Afterpay, Zip, both backdoor listings. Both used to be mining companies. Those mining developments didn't work out. There was still a listed company with some cash on the balance sheet. Essentially, that business then bought Zip or Afterpay, and the original shareholders of the listed company might then own 10% of the combined business, which is much bigger. But to do that now, you have to go through a process around change of size, right? If it's a materially different size of business, and change of purpose. So both of those things require ASX approval, and both of those things require essentially disclosure, and you have to do, you might as well just list, in essence. So that's how you get on. Now, how you get off, again, really 3 ways of getting off. One is you just say, hey, we're leaving. And you can do that. You can leave the ASX. You might need a vote. Depends on the company, all that sort of stuff. But you can just choose to not be listed anymore, and be a public unlisted company. As I said in the last one, you still got the same sort of exposure to reporting requirements, etc. But the theory is that you will save some money on the being listed side. The second way is that you can fail to fulfill your obligations as a publicly listed company Maybe you don't put out your annual report in time. Maybe you breach listing rules. You can become suspended for any number of reasons. And if your suspension lasts a long time, just by the nature of that, by the nature of being suspended for a long time, called long-term suspended entities, you can just be kicked off. And the ASX, essentially, they're a business. They have a rule set to operate in, and if you act outside of that rule set, they can choose to kick you off. It doesn't happen very often, obviously, but it does happen. And the most common way to leave the ASX is to be bought. This is obviously all excluding just death in general, but most listed companies don't die. They kind of reinvigorate themselves. But the most common way is to be bought. You get bought by another listed business, you get absorbed into that company, you get bought by private equity or private business, you get absorbed over there, and your listed entity ceases to exist and the stock ceases to exist because it all gets bought and people get paid cash. But they're the ways to come in and to come out.